Hi everyone, welcome to another Reasons and Resources episode. So for this one, we are looking at reasons and resources for learning APL. And if you've been watching the series, you'll probably get the feeling there's a bit of a theme developing here, and a lot of the languages that we're looking at have, I suppose, or a lot of people would consider them to have more historical significance. And this, I think, falls into one of those categories. So what I'll do first of all, I think, is I'll talk a little bit about how I became exposed to the language, and then we'll talk about, outside of that, maybe other reasons why APL might be worth taking a look at. You can see, if we start off in the Wikipedia page, which is always a good place, I think, to start, you can see a number of paradigms mentioned here, which some of you may recognise, some of these you may not. So you've got functional, structured, modular. It's an example of an array programming language. So that might be, in and of itself, a particular reason why someone might want to learn it. The reason why I became exposed to it is the same reason that I've given in a lot of these episodes. A lot of what I'm talking about, or when I talk about more historical languages, all roads seem to lead back to a book I picked up many years ago called Comparative Programming Languages. And in there, when you get to the back of the book, there's a section on, recommended books to read for different languages. And there was a section on, not surprisingly, APL. And it was covered in the book to some degree. And as a result, I picked up a number of interesting books. So I had, when I bought this was before the days of Amazon, basically. And so I used to have a very nice local bookseller. That was back in the days where if you wanted a book, you didn't hop on the internet to buy it. You went down to your local bookseller and they would order it for you through their computer system. So I used to go down there with this big list of books I wanted for my sort of burgeoning programming language library, where I was sort of building this collection, if you like, of books that I felt were of historical significance in some way, or I could afford to buy them. And for the APL books, it got really interesting because, in a result of trying to get hold of these, the bookseller had to go through like an independent publisher who was based in Bristol. And they were really interested, apparently, in who was buying these books. Because they were sort of an independent publisher. And so much so they actually threw in a copy of something called Vector, which we'll see what that is in a moment. It's not the language vector, it's actually one of those sort of educational collections. Originally published by the British Computer Society. So the two APL books I've got, this one, an APL tutorial, and another one called an Encyclopedia of APL. I don't know how clear it is, but as you can see, these are the authors for the APL tutorial. The Encyclopedia of APL is authored by Gary Heltzer, I think I'm saying that right. And that has a similar style cover, except the symbols, the APL symbols on it, are in a sort of orangey colour. And I'll do an episode on... if I haven't mentioned already, at some point in the future, not straight away, I'll do My Life in Objects episode where I'll show these books on camera so you can see what the layout of them is like. And you can see these date back pretty old. I think my APL tutorial version is... I don't know what edition this is actually, it's difficult to tell. Not sure, but the Encyclopedia of APL I've got is a second edition. And I mentioned also what happened was when the local bookseller received the package from the publisher, he said, "Oh, the publisher sent this other thing that you might be interested in, which was the Collected Education Vector, November 1988 to 1991, which is this." If we go in, I don't know if it's going to let me go in there because it's considered to be unsecure. Yeah. So these sort of issues. Yeah. So there is a British APL association. So I'll include a link to this, and you can dig around in there if you want. So outside of my sort of historical learning reasons and, just, the process of, I suppose, taking a look at different paradigms through the lens of comparative programming languages. Why might someone, what might be some other good reasons to learn APL? So I mentioned about it being an array programming language or array paradigm. So, as I think I've mentioned before, there is something very powerful about when you learn a paradigm, really leaning into that way of thinking. So, if you're learning, I think I mentioned Smalltalk last week, if you're learning object-oriented programming, you really want to get into that frame of thinking 100%, then, Smalltalk's quite a good way of doing that. And you could argue the same true of APL. If you were looking to get into an array-oriented way of thinking, then leaning into APL is a good way to do that. The language is very concise, as we'll see when we look at some examples in a moment. And on first, maybe even second reading, it doesn't look particularly readable. But my understanding is once you get used to the symbols used, because there's some very strange symbols, then, and lean into that, then it becomes more readable because of the way it expresses the intent directly, without, necessarily obstacles. So it's a question of sort of understanding the symbols. Once you do that, then you can understand the intent. I think that's the idea. And tied in with all of that, and the array-oriented thing just helps you think differently about programming in terms of things like data transformations, functional composition, how the various ways in which languages do or don't abstract certain concepts, those sort of things. Now, because this is a language that's very much wrapped around, if you like, array-oriented thinking, then you would expect that you're going to get higher performance in array operations and say other languages that aren't leaning into that paradigm. So that might be another reason why you might want to learn it, is if you're involved in a lot of array operations and you're interested in exploring, kicking the tires of a language where that is highly optimized and there's high performance. And then finally, it might just be purely for the intellectual challenge and fun. Maybe you're on the road to more esoteric programming languages, and APL is an interesting side quest, if you like, on that overall quest. As I've said, I'll include this is a sort of starting link. You can see, 1966. I mean, there's languages older than that, but yeah, pretty old language. Also, the AE programming language book, which is what APL is named after, you can track down fairly easily on the web. One of the links I think actually leads to it in here. Yeah, it's actually this one leads directly to it, so you can find it from that way. I'll include some deep links as well within the article, but the other thing to do is there's a separate article about APL syntax and symbols as well, because that's something you do need to wrap your head around. And the other problem is, of course, why it's can be a little bit restrictive, and we'll come on to ways of getting around that in a moment, is there's a lot of symbols here where there's actually like a special keyboard that you can use to do programming in APL. But we'll look at ways, if you want to dabble with APL, you can get around that. Yeah, so I'll include here we go. There it is, APL2 keyboard. And there's some code there. There's some implementations. Probably this is, I would say, the one to go for, which is Dialog APL, and I'll include some links for that in a moment. And then there's a whole, there's quite a number of resources, and even if you just riff around this, there's quite a bit of stuff in here that you can investigate. So I'll make sure there is a link to that as well. And probably several of these books you'll notice are collections where they might be mentioning APL as part of a wider discussion of the origins of programming languages and the origins of APL. So I've got some interesting links here to various YouTube videos as well, which will come on to a couple of YouTube's videos in a moment. I don't think, to be honest with you, we're going to find APL on any one of the Stack Overflow surveys. I could be wrong. It might be buried away in here somewhere, possibly. But on first look, I do not think it's actually there. Has it snuck into the top paying technologies? Is there a demand for APL programmers out there? I'm not sure. I don't see it there. And if we have a look at some of the other ones, it's quite the other lists of, like popular programming languages like the Toby one. We might find it possibly buried away in there. There it is, look. 51 to 100. And the IEE Spectrum one. Do we see it lurking around? No, if we do. So, I would suggest, if you want to dabble in it, this might be the easiest way, and I'll include a link. So there's like an online try APL website, which is an excellent starting point from there. So we've got some primers as well. So that's one possibility. If you really want to go for it, then you could leverage Dialog. There is also a free book about mastering Dialog. And as you saw, Dialog is an implementation of APL. So if you want to run that locally, play around with it, you can. But I would probably go for this first. You can see up here we've got all the symbols across the top. So there's also this APL2C APL compiler, which you might want to take a look at. Oops, some of this doesn't look like it's working actually, but I did stumble across this. X and Y minutes do have a fairly short section on their website, a lot shorter than you normally see with some of the languages, but there is some very simple APL here that doesn't go into too many of the special symbols, so you can maybe try those out. as you saw there was a link to the APL wiki, so there is an APL wiki as well, which you can leverage, and a couple of videos. We've got an APL demonstration from 1975 from Imperial College London's archives, and then there's also the Dialogue user meetings channel on YouTube, and you can see that the oldest video is 4 months old, so there is stuff still here. What's the most popular one? Algorithms as a tool of thought. Okay, cool. Then there's Dialogue Glasgow 2024. So you've got, this is quite useful actually, where they've collected together various videos and slides of the Dialogue Glasgow meetings. There's another list of podcasts there that you might be able to find information about APL. Bear in mind some of these might be old or aren't posting very regularly, that sort of thing. Now, not surprisingly, yet I haven't got around to doing a page on the programming polyglot. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that myself, so this might be the last language that I attempt out of this list, and it may be as I add further languages here I sort of put this off and put this off. But as you can see here, there's plenty of resources in terms of dabbling in the language. The main problem I'm going to have, I think, is tackling the symbol side of things. If I try and do it as an entry on here, and who knows what monstrosity might get spat out by an LLM when I ask it to teach me APL. So we'll see. Yeah, it's all fun and games till you have to learn the APL symbol set, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. But anyway, yeah, joking aside, I do find it fascinating to learn some of these languages where you go down a particular rabbit hole or go off on a quest where you wouldn't normally necessarily go on, and it does enlighten you into a certain way of thinking about a certain paradigm, and you find your sort of programming horizons are expanded quite considerably by doing that. Also, even just seeing what was influenced by it, and then seeing if maybe, for example, recently, I think I was taking a look at where was it? Was it Factor? I think, yeah, Factor, and a lot of people that saw the video on that was released as, I think, as a gentle introduction to where I did it. And I will be doing an episode in the future, reasons and resources for Factor. But what was nice with Factor on the road to learning, say something like Fourth, is Factor has this really lovely IDE. I'm not saying Fourth doesn't, but yeah, there's something about it which really helped me understand the stack side of, the stack paradigm. And so what you might well find is when you're exploring a language and you're really wrestling with maybe the interface or some aspect of it, have a look at the influences, the influence by, and see if maybe there's a slightly easier route in to the language via an influence, a language that's been influenced by it, and see if, maybe it helps you understand the paradigm a little bit without you having to sort of understand any special symbols or some other aspects. It sort of takes away a little bit from it. So that might be helpful. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.